How's it going, everybody? It's Pilot Flame, and we are back with another FPL sort of ish video, back with another football video, and we're going to be talking about our tactics talks. Now, what I've done is I've combined the two Spurs defeats, so the one versus Leicester where they lost 2-0, and the one where they lost to Liverpool the week before that 2-1. And we're going to break down kind of two reasons as to why they lost that game in terms of goals that they're conceding. So Spurs defense has been quite good, one of the better ones, and they've been scoring goals for fun. But sometimes that always doesn't work, because when Mourinho's tactics don't work and they don't get the space in behind with Son and Kane to create plays, or you shut those two players down, they don't really have much else going on. So we're going to take a look at the two goals that they conceded. We're also going to talk about how they've been combated by the two teams they played in Liverpool and Leicester. I mean, Klopp and Brendan Rodgers are both very good managers in their own right. Some may say in the top 10 in the world. Some may say Klopp's the best in the world. But we will definitely break that down for you. And I wanted to go with a bit more of a nuanced style here rather than just look at one particular game, because I think both elements of each game show the reasonings as to why Spurs have lost those last two games. If you haven't done so already, make sure to leave a like on the video. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you're new, and turn those notification bells on so that you can get the content as soon as it is readily available. Also, make sure to follow us over on Twitter and Twitch. It's PilotFlame226 on those platforms. Links are in the description. Make sure to check the pinned comment down below as to when we'll be live streaming next over on Twitch. It is most likely at the time of recording of this video, which is Christmas Eve. So happy and Merry Christmas to all of those that will be enjoying the festive periods, as well as make sure to tune in for our Boxing Day early deadline stream. As per normal, it's going to be 5 a.m. EST start time, 1 hour before the FPL deadline for Game Week 15. We're also going to be doing a tinkering stream, because I'm going to have my wildcard active going into Game Week 16, probably around 7 p.m. EST on the 27th, and then again we'll have the deadline stream on the 28th. So 3 days, 3 streams, and it's going to be a very hectic during that Christmas period. But without further ado, let's see the reasonings as to why Liverpool and Leicester were able to get the upper hand over Jose Mourinho's Tottenham Hotspurs. So we're going to try to encompass as much detail as possible for the two goals that Spurs conceded. However, we're going to take a look at kind of how they set up in most games, and pretty much what Mourinho favors, whether he's at United, whether he was at Inter Milan, whether he's at Tottenham Hotspurs this season. It's basically a 4-2-3-1 with two more destructive midfielders that are more focused on intercepting the ball, cutting passing lanes, providing, defensive coverage, covering for the attacking fullbacks, those sorts of actions. They're not really going to be the creative types of players. That's where the player playing in the number 10 position or the striker kind of comes in hand, and they basically use these two players to play balls in behind, typically what you would refer to as like a long ball style of play. And the way they kind of utilize that is they go into a low block. So what they do is they have the wide men tuck in, they have the number 10 and the striker sit in a position where they're in a pretty much of a low block, and what they try to do is pick up the ball when a team's in transition in the attack, and they transition the ball from this big area right here into the channels on either side, in and behind the defense. And typically they use the likes of Son, who's been very prevalent and very clinical this year. And usually this role is taken up by Steven Bergwijn, someone who works quite hard defensively and is also good on the counter as well. And typically this role is played by Ndombele, someone who's very good at pressing, someone who's very good at coming into this space, picking up the ball, turning on the swivel, much like Harry Kane, and playing the ball in behind, which they've done quite a lot this season. Now with the Leicester game, this was the personnel that they had on the field at the time when they conceded their second goal, which ended up being an own goal. It was a Jamie Vardy assist as he played the ball off of Alderweireld and it went in the goal. But it's a very, very easy goal to potentially prevent. Now, the problem is with, Spurs is that when they're, transitioning and attacking, what they typically do is they leave Kane to kind of freely, kind of drop in and kind of pick up the ball, because they know they're going back down the other end. But if they're caught out midway through transition, they can definitely be got at, because, the likes of Eric Dyer and Toby Alderweireld aren't very fast, and they're typically left exposed in a somewhat of a high line. So if I'm just going to set it up here. So basically we had James Justin coming in on the overlap. We had Eric Dyer kind of marshalling the defense. Højbjerg was more in this position. Lucas Moore was more or less tracking back here. Albrighton was over here, and it was in a mid transition because if you go and actually watch the actual footage of how the goal happened, Son, Kane, and Bale, who were all on the field at the time, were all off screen. We had Toby Alderweireld kind of playing in and around the D. We had Sissoko here, who was actually slightly behind Vardy at the time when Albrighton picks up the ball on this side. We had Aurier kind of marking Barnes out in this space. And then we had Tielemans kind of coming into the picture. But for the rest of these guys, they were all off screen. So I can only assume that they were somewhere in, this type of formation of some kind. But these are the main guys here that we're going to pay attention to. Maybe not Tielemans so much, but it was more or less a transition. So you can tell you have 1, 2, 3 Spurs players off screen that aren't defending. So Son, Bale, and Kane are not back in their like defensive shape. They're 4-4-2, which can lead to some problems. However, if you look at this kind of position here, they're pretty well covered. They got a 4v2 situation here. They have what would be a good 2v2 here, and they have Aurier, who's probably better in the air versus Barnes. So you're thinking they pretty much have it well covered. That would be in a normal circumstances if they were able to stop the cross or stop the overlap, and Vardy didn't get goal side of Sissoko. So what happens is Tielemans is just making kind of a run, and he ends up kind of more or less on the edge of the box if the ball were to come out. Aurier tracks the run of Barnes, so far nothing really too complicated here. Dyer kind of drops in here. Reguilon follows the James Justin run down the line, which takes him out of the equation. Højbjerg kind of covers the run and wants to stop him basically in this position here. And Moore is like desperately trying to track back and see if he can get to Albrighton, who drives into this area right in here before he ends up crossing the ball. Now, what does Vardy do? Well, Vardy basically just makes a run into basically what we like to call the danger zone here. So this area here, if the ball is whipped in here with some type of pace and is somewhere in and around this line here, the keeper can't come out and get it, and it requires the defender having to go backwards to be able to go back and then head it out or head it out for a corner, one of the two. So what happens is Sissoko realizes he's in a bad position and can't get there. So Vardy he makes his run in here. Sissoko then has to go in and around him and then come to block off to see if he can block the ball off there. Now, if Vardy's able to head this ball at goal, he has a very good chance of scoring. And Alderweireld is kind of just caught in no man's land here and really just kind of tracks back and kind of goes, just in and behind the penalty spot. So let's get rid of all the lines here. So as it progresses, Aurier follows Barnes, who makes a run. Tielemans kind of ends up in this position. Højbjerg kind of comes across. Moore comes across. Albrighton gets into this position with plenty of space. Reguilon follows Justin, who's making the run down the line. And Dyer just keeps dropping back for whatever reason rather than closing the man down, because Albrighton can only go backwards here or put in a cross. So the one thing that they want to do is stop the cross. And if you look at Vardy, he's got a clear space in here to run in behind. So Alderweireld drops back. Vardy makes the run, pulling Sissoko with him. Sissoko kind of runs in this kind of arc here, this shape, because Vardy gets goal side of him, ends up having to turn his head around and kind of look, over his shoulder to kind of see where Vardy is. The ball gets swung in beautifully by Albrighton, makes its way in here. Alderweireld caught in a pretty, what would seem like an okay position. Vardy ends up getting up and over the top of Sissoko, heading the ball downwards, which ends up going into Alderweireld, who can't find his feet, and then it ends up going into the back of the net. So something that could have been very, very easily prevented. One with either, better positioning from Sissoko, maybe some extra coverage from one of the extra men over on this side, some potential tracking back from the right-sided attacker. All of these things could have been possible. Now, Castagna could have been coming down this line as well. Indeed, he could have ended up picking this position, but we couldn't really see it based on the angle. But it's inexcusable that when the ball is in this position and you have 4 players in and surrounding Albrighton, you can't give him the space to cross. The only thing you can do is potentially play it down the line, in which case you would probably bet Sissoko and Alderweireld to be able to, when they're running at the ball as it's crossed in, to head it out. So in this case, just very, very sloppy defending, and it all comes from more of a transitional play where Spurs aren't able to set up, get their positioning, set up the 2 banks of 4, kind of slowly make their way, encroach themselves onto the ball, and then 1-2, couple of quick passes, and then in and behind. So that was one of the kind of bad points there for the Leicester game, and we saw Leicester did quite well with that. Spurs aren't very good, or Jose Mourinho teams haven't been very good when teams just don't give them space, and that's exactly what Leicester did. And they typically use Ndidi to basically man mark Kane in large portions of the game, where basically anytime Kane got the ball, Ndidi was basically right on top of him. And then Albrighton did the same thing with tracking Son, with the help of Fofana, who had an excellent game as well. Moving on to the set piece for Liverpool versus Spurs. This was in the 89th or 90th minute, whatever it was, in the game. And the problem that arises here is that something that a lot of Premier League teams and a lot of teams around the world are still doing, but they don't do it to their full effectiveness, and that is zonal marking. Now here, there's a good bit of man marking, but the problem is that the likes of Kane is pretty much in no man's land and is basically positioned in such a way to whereas he is going to be kind of the free player to basically help wherever the ball goes in if Kane goes up and heads the ball. And as a free player, you basically need to ensure that you get yourself in that position to get the ball away. Someone of his height, someone of his ability to head the ball. He's very good defensively and did show quite good defensive prowess on set pieces for Spurs. Obviously, that's not what you want him to be doing in most cases. You want him to be scoring, but we have Alisson, Fabinho, Trent Alexander-Arnold, Curtis Jones, Henderson, Firmino, Williams, Salah, Mane, Wijnaldum, and Robertson, an unchanged team from their starting lineup for this set play. Whereas Ben Davies had come on, I believe Lucas Moura had come on, and Dele Alli had come on for, I think it was Son, and Ndombele, and Lo Celso. Lo Celso being was injured, I think, or was just taken off. And Ndombele was taken off, and Son was taken off very late. So this was just before the set piece, and I think it was mainly to bring on Ali, who's very good at like holding up the ball. So if they got the ball, as we mentioned previously, when they like to transition, they can get the ball in this space and then play the ball in behind Trent, in behind Fabinho in these 2 positions. It's happy days for them. However, they don't have Son, so they would have had to rely on the likes of Aurier or Reguilon or something like that, or Moura would be the other ones there. So what happens in this situation? So Reguilon and Jones are pretty much, I'm going to move them out of the way because they don't really threaten the goal pretty much at all. They kind of just hover around that space. Højbjerg and Davies here have Wijnaldum covered, who kind of makes a little run towards the near post. So that's pretty much covered. So I'm going to move them out of the way as well because they don't really play too much of a part. Aurier and Mane kind of just hug each other for the majority of the set piece. So again, they're just going to be positioned around this area. Not really too much here. It's in this block of 5 versus 4 or 6 versus 4 if you want to count the goalkeeper. So what happens is basically Firmino is going to make a run towards the penalty spot. Jordan Henderson's going to help go towards the front post, whereas Wijnaldum's going to be a bit more deeper on the front post. Reece Williams, I think is how you pronounce his name, is going to be more towards the back post, and then Salah's going to be like basically like the baseline, as it were. And those are the positions that they kind of attack, covering the entire goal with the ability of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 players that they have there overall. So what happens? So Robertson, left-footed delivery, is going to be an outswinger. Henderson makes a good run towards the front post. Dyer gets his feet caught, and he ends up basically being taken out of the equation. Now, what does this mean? This means that Kane now has to obviously address the situation where, with Dyer not being able to track Henderson, he has to basically pick up the free man because now they only have 3v4 plus him if it's going to be 4v4. So what Sissoko is kind of put in a very precarious situation is that he has to choose, do I pick Firmino or do I pick Henderson? And what he does is he ends up picking Henderson, which he probably should because it's better for him to follow Henderson and not just give him a free run. So what he does is he ends up following Henderson along this path here. That leaves Firmino. So what Kane should be doing is seeing if Firmino comes in, and he should be going to address the ball. Unfortunately, he doesn't actually do that because he thinks that Alderweireld is going to come across and cut the ball off or go to just win the header. Moura and Salah are more or less out of the equation because they kind of end up in this space over here. And what happens is Reece Williams ends up making, I'm just going to draw it off to the side here. He ends up making a run towards this space, which tracks Alderweireld with him, which basically leaves this pocket of space for Firmino to kind of run in and head the ball, which Kane has to be wary of, being the zonal marker, and has to pick up the space. Kane has to be aware, or somebody has to be aware, it looked like it was Kane obviously in this case, that he's going to be the one that needs to be like, the ball's going to drop some in and around just behind the penalty spot or thereabouts. I need to go up and win that before Firmino gets there. And what happens is Kane ends up just dropping back. Firmino ends up running into this space. Robertson whips the ball into this area. And Firmino pretty much, when Dyer goes down, gets pretty much a free header into the goal. And since there's a lot of bodies in front of Lloris, he can't really react. Kane's more or less in front of Lloris, as is Aurier and Mane. And Firmino just gets a free run and just shows what a man advantage in terms of when you're maneuvering around in on the set play can do. And it wasn't even that convoluted, wasn't even that complicated of a setup. It was just 4 players attacking basically like the baseline, the front post, the penalty spot, the back post, and the other baseline for the potential, where the ball could end up going in. And all of them are very good positions. If Robertson does an outswinger into here, you can potentially flick it on towards the penalty spot where Firmino is going to be. Front post is easy to just kind of flick in at the near post there. Far post could be knocked back across. And the far post could just be a straight bullet header as well. And the most threatening one is the one that they basically left open. And that's why zonal marking can be, a bit scrutinized. I've not been a big fan of it. I think you just pick up your man. Who's the most threatening? Let's put our best aerial players on it. Or if you do have somebody, they need to be, aware enough of the situation, who basically gets taken out of the equation, whether it be so they get blocked off or screened off on a run. In this case, it was Dyer who basically fell over and then was complaining afterwards, even though he kind of just lost his feet. And you need those zonal players to be just wary and thinking that if the ball comes in this area at all, I need to be running onto it and heading that out. Whereas if you're man marking, then okay, if Kane was on Firmino, then he's like, wherever Firmino goes, I go. And I think that's much better suited. So overall, I think that 2 very preventable goals from Spurs, but they definitely are susceptible to that. I don't think Spurs are very good, defensively on set pieces. If basically Kane is kind of has to make a decision between 2 players, or one of their center backs gets taken out, as well as in transition, Dyer and Alderweireld aren't the fastest players, and repositioning themselves with the likes of Sissoko, who can be questioned sometimes for his footballing IQ. In terms of where he needs to be positionally, his recklessness sometimes can be a bit of a problem. Then they can, cause some problems for Spurs. Aurier as well, giving away a penalty to Jamie Vardy. That's another thing that they also have to kind of consider, is that defensively, they may have been keeping clean sheets, but there are definitely things to show that there are some red flags to get at this Spurs defense. And when they go 1-0 behind, they're not very good at coming back. Whereas a lot of Spurs' games this season, much like the Man United game, much like many other games that they typically won, they usually scored the first goal, which is exactly what Mourinho wants. He wants to get the first goal and then sit everyone behind the ball and then just burn you with counterattack after counterattack after counterattack, which is exactly what he did versus United, and it was even more glorified because of the red card. But yeah. So that's kind of my breakdown. Those are the 2 more important things. The other goals were just like a typical counterattack goal from Spurs, which we knew could happen in the Liverpool game. A deflected goal from Salah from a shot outside the box. And then the other one was a penalty, which is just, again, highlights defensive frailties for the likes of Spurs. Aurier could have been considered Spurs' best defender. But again, the recklessness comes through, and he ends up just kind of just shoving the man down and then giving away a penalty. So, yeah. I think Spurs could definitely pull it back, but we will have to see over the tough Christmas period. And that's going to do it for this week's extended-ish edition of Tactics Talk in regards to Tottenham Hotspurs. Make sure to leave a like on the video if you enjoy it, subscribe to the channel if you're new, and turn those notification bells on so that you can get the content as soon as it is readily available. And drop us a follow over on Twitter and Twitch. It's PilotFlame226 on those platforms. Also, make sure to check us out for the deadline stream over on Twitch. You'll get the notification if you're following us over on that platform. And there's a pinned comment down below to give you the exact time as to when that will be. Most likely at the time of recording this video, which is Christmas Eve. It will be the deadline stream for Gameweek 15 on Boxing Day. So, thanks for watching. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and until the next one, take care.